Let's get into it. So the idea of today's session, so please mute if you're not speaking, but as you should have found out by now, it is an option for you to join in the conversation and voice your questions rather than to having to put them on chat. The idea today is to take you through the Sirdar Applied Directorship Programme, answer any questions you might have. Warwick's joined me, who's our CEO. I'm Tim Holmes, Senior Partner. I'll be the facilitator for the programs. Really just make sure that you've got a full understanding of what it's about, what we're going to be covering, and also answer the question for yourself, is this relevant for me? Is this going to take me forward in my journey from wherever I am now to being a hopefully great director? That's our intent, is to try and move the needle and move people to a space where they're really truly acting as great directors. So for those of you who haven't heard of us before, the reason why we have lots of pictures of mountains is because the meaning of the name Sirdar that we're using in our branding is the lead Sherpa on a mountain expedition. So you decide how big a mountain you want to climb, how big a business you want to build, and we'll help you along that journey, primarily through the board. So making sure you have the right training, the right equipment, the right tools, the right team, and then going along with you on that journey. So part of that journey, or part of that base camp training, as it were, is the Applied Directorship Programme, but we also offer guide support services where we go with you along the journey of building a board, appointing new directors, non-exec directors, building the agenda, building your board papers, and really moving the needle in terms of the effectiveness of that team called the board. So yes, the analogy is Sirdar, lead Sherpa, and it's very much about going with you on the journey rather than here's the kit, here's your map, off you go, which is more of the sort of consulting kind of engagement. And who we talking to, who we developed this program for, are experienced directors, next-gen directors, aspiring directors, and CEOs and entrepreneurs who wish to learn a little bit more about what's involved, because by the very nature of the fact you've signed up as a director on CIPC or your related country's company register, you have the same roles and responsibilities as any other director, and it's really, really important for you to know and understand what that means and what you're in for. You know, where can things go wrong, and how do you mitigate those risks? So we can just put it in chat. I think I've got it on here as well. But just if you can just put in the chat what roles you currently hold. So do you fit into an experienced director category? In other words, you've held positions either as a non-exec or as an exec for a period of time. This is not completely new to you. Are you moving into the space where you have an opportunity as the next generation to join the board of one of the family companies? Are you aspiring? So you may have come from a corporate background, you may have come from an exec background, and in your career journey, in your portfolio career journey, you're looking to start to take on positions as a non-exec director. Or are you a founder and maybe you've got investors coming into your business and now you need to professionalize the board process a little bit, or you've just got to a point where your business is being held back and it'd be really useful to have a team to support you as the founder and CEO, and that the best team to do that is the team of directors. So we've got, who have we got? So yeah, can everybody see the chat, the meeting chat? Entrepreneur founder, great, Ben. Cabano. So whilst she's entrepreneur, fantastic. So I'll just go around in clockwise direction just to explain the value for each, and then we can. I think looks like we've got a selection. Entrepreneur, business, someone to business, aspiring potentially, aspiring. Great. Okay. So for experienced directors, what we found was that when we were appointing directors, we found that they didn't really have a good understanding of all that is involved in governance, and also specifically what's changed in terms of governance thinking, and particularly what's changed in the companies acts in various countries around Africa and the world. So even though individuals were coming into the program with sometimes decades of experience as directors, they still had significant gaps in their knowledge and understanding. And there were also quite a lot of bad habits, as it were, or things that have changed that needed to unlearn. So everyone we've had on the team on the course who's even as a very experienced director has said they've come out with a really different understanding of what governance is all about now, and also a much clearer understanding of what their roles and responsibilities are and how much more onerous it actually is now than they thought it was. For aspiring directors, it's absolutely critical you walk into the boardroom for your first board meeting with a really clear understanding of what's involved and how to act, what questions to ask, what your responsibilities are, etc. It's very difficult to learn all of that stuff just by sitting in the boardroom. So by far the best way of getting up to speed quickly is to go through a course like this where you have some theory, you have some practical application in a boardroom, simulated boardroom environment, so that when you actually move into the real world and apply and get appointed as a non-exec director, you'll walk into the room with a lot more confidence. You'll come across in the interview with a lot more confidence, certainly, but when you're in the room, you should be able to start contributing, adding value quite quickly. And you may also find that you are actually one of the most knowledgeable people in the room in terms of directorship, because very few people who are directors have done any formal training, because there is no requirement to do so. There's a requirement to do in the Companies Act to say you should be doing ongoing training, but it's not really policed. So very few directors actually have had formal learning. Next generation directors, again, similar to aspiring, it's moving into a space where you need to add value quickly. You need to demonstrate that you're not there just because. And again, upskilling yourself, having a clear understanding of what's needed may put you off. Maybe it's you decide, well, actually, I'd rather work in the organization than sit on the board. But either way, it's an opportunity to really have a clear understanding of what that role looks like as and when you move into it. And for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and founders, as I've said earlier, there's an inflection point with all businesses where you need to get more serious. And that may be because an investor's coming in, maybe because the business has become much more complex and you're now starting to feel quite lonely at the top. And one of the best teams, or the best team to build, is an effective board, because the intent of an effective board is to support and challenge the CEO, but it's a safe space where you can have confidential conversations that you really can't have anywhere else. You can't have them with family members, you can't have them with work colleagues, you can't even sometimes have them with fellow shareholders who aren't directors, because there's a conflict and the different roles and hats start to get very confusing. So it's really important to have that team around you, potentially non-exec directors and ideally independent non-exec directors, so that you can have the conversations you need to have, so you can formulate decisions and make decisions in a much more comprehensive and effective way than you would have been able to make on your own or with a small team of executives. So we cover all of those kinds of aspects, the full gambit of what's needed as a director in the course. And it doesn't really matter what level of skill or understanding you've had going into it. There will be things that you don't know, the things that you may need to unlearn, as I've said before. So that's a very quick overview.
I'm gonna hop in there and I'm gonna hop in there and quickly say something. Yeah, I'm gonna pop in and I'm just gonna say, I was at a founder function this morning, and one of these guys in a business accelerator was saying to me, yeah, but like we've been told, like don't go aboard because look at what happened to Steve Jobs and Yanni Mouton, and their boards ended up firing them, and it's such an interesting thing. Is it? Why do you think that is? Is that when you start out in your career, you learn how to become a lawyer or an engineer or, a fitter or turner. And so you learn a hard skill. And that hard skill then it enables you to be better and better at your business. And then you focus on your business and you scale your business. But nobody's ever actually taught the art and the skill of directing. So what is the professional director? And unfortunately, across the world, we have these institutes. And so these institutes of directors believe that they are the arbiters and the holders of this, some kind of mythical title of director. And actually, it's a practical skill. It's as much of a skill as it is to learn how to be, a fitter or turner or engineer or doctor or lawyer. It's a skill, and it's a learned skill. And it's a skill you can be taught quite easily. Now, the other thing, just to sort of segue from that, is that everybody's going, oh, no, just build yourself an IR board. It's very simple, go along, get 5 or 6 different avatar people and personalities, and, then you can upload all your board papers to them. And then, Claude, the new 4.7, it's amazing. It'll do it all for you. Sure. But can you imagine how we're going to progress as entrepreneurs and as directors and as controlling minds if we're constantly delegating out all of the controlling mind decisions to AI? So one of the things about critical thinking is critical thinking. And we all know that you can tell an AI bot to be critical, but it's going to be critical to the point where your prompt is. So how critical is your prompt on what you're telling it to do? So that in of itself is a skill. And the learned skill is, and we often are asked, what makes a really great director? A really great director is somebody who pays attention and who's constantly thinking critically. So that skill set is, how does that equate into, and how does it manifest into sitting and building out a board? So we've got a couple of methodologies, and we've got a couple of best practices, and we've been in business for 15 years. So we've seen it all. We've taken businesses through founder stage all the way through to exit at multiples of billions of rands. And so we have really seen what does and what doesn't work practically. So one of the things that we like to equip people with is, from day one, you're learning. From day one, you're taking stuff that's relevant and is applied, which is why a degree is called the Applied Directorship Programme, is that we're taking people to say, like, after the first hour, after the first 2 hours, you can go back to your business and go, hey, I'm going to do this because, it works. So that's the kind of, and I just wanted to really debunk this theory that a board is, 6-7 hour meetings, and it's like going through a mini audit, and you got to submit your financials and get told by some like oldie, oh no, you don't know what you're doing. Like, it's not how it works.
Well, I suppose the danger is the shame is that it does work that way, and that's not the way it's supposed to work. And there's way too many examples of where it's done badly because people either don't know any better, or there's all these power dynamics that where one particular person has the strongest voice and everything is taken in that direction. So yes, a board should be a team of equals, which we'll talk about in a second. And it's important that everybody in the board equally understands what the roles and responsibilities are. Otherwise, they're just going to sit quietly inside and not get engaged, and then that seat is not being used effectively. We need someone who's going to add value in every seat, not just warming the seat. And that's all of those dynamics are at play in quite a significant portion of boards. So if that's the role, that model that someone else has seen, then the likelihood is it's not going to be a great example. So we want to try and build a good example in your mind by taking you through the process over and over and over again, so that you can go into the real world with confidence and not even belief. It's knowing, okay, this thing works. We've just got to implement it properly. And this is not the same as being executive.
And I think the other thing, Tim, a lot of the time, we get like forced to comply or else, so we get told this is the law and this is what can happen to you if you don't, right? This is what happens if you don't do what we say. This is what happens if you don't, personally liable. That's not the purpose of a board, any more than the purpose of driving a motor vehicle isn't to obey or not obey the rules of the road. You're driving a motor vehicle so you can get from one place to the other place. You're not sitting there thinking, oh, I wonder what all the things that can go wrong with this motor vehicle are while I drive down the road, right? You're using the vehicle to get to a place. And I think it's exactly the same thing with directorship. Everybody's thinking about all these rules, and well, if you go across the stop street, well, you're going to be found guilty of this, and if you don't turn left here, you're going to be found guilty of that. It's not the point. The point is you're driving this vehicle to get to your destination, and that's what directorship is. It's being an alert and awake driver.
Yep, absolutely, and asking good questions.
Yeah, and asking good questions. Speaking of good questions, Ben Maxwell. AI also struggles to move up higher order level thinking. Absolutely, 100%. So and it's like any machine. You're going to get the quality of what you get out is what you put in. And so if you haven't got a lot of experience with prompting or with using the system, you could get a completely wrong answer. And that's why it's nice to be able to ask good critical questions and have have people that are like-minded around you that can go, oh, hold on, I also tried that didn't work. Yeah, good.
Yeah, so it's about becoming better equipped to make meaningful strategic decisions. We're introducing you to a robust methodology. As Warwick intimated before, we started this program in 2017. As a company, we've been around since 2008, and we've been following the same methodology the entire time. And I know from experience, it still works. It's still absolutely valid. And interestingly, it's becoming closer and closer to the governance models that are used everywhere. So ISO 37000 is very similar to what we've been teaching for the last 15 years. It's just represented in a different way. So it's really encouraging that that common understanding of what works is that where everyone's going, and it's moving away from rules-based because it doesn't work. It's moving towards principle-based, and those principles apply anywhere on the planet. They don't just apply in particular countries. So one of the reasons why we really enjoy having a mixed cohort is because it helps them demonstrate that the principles teaching in South Africa are exactly the same principles that need to be implemented in Ghana and Kenya and Egypt and Uganda and wherever, because they are the common principles that work. And then the individual rules in individual country need to be overlaid on that. But you're at least starting with a really good understanding, a really good framework that you can build on. So it's about learning to promote ethical conduct. It's about leveraging the diversity of thinking in the boardroom. What does that mean? How do you build a board that has diversity? Experiencing the boardroom simulation. So we take you through 8 board meetings in the middle of the program, which I'll go through in a second, that gives you an opportunity to try this stuff, to test this stuff, to put it into practice. See what it's like working with a group of strangers in a board context, thinking with only a director hat on. So again, it forces you to move out of the space of wearing shareholder, director, and manager hat all at once to, in this context, in this game, you're only thinking, or only should be thinking, as a director hat, because you don't have those other responsibilities in this context. So that you can move out and be recognized as someone who really knows what it means to be a high-performance director. So what we mean by high-performance director is one is obsessed with creating meaningful economic impact, and there's always an argument about, well, is it all about the money? No, but money facilitates other things. So if you want to give socially, you need to make a profit first, and then you can spend it on other things. And economic impact doesn't necessarily need to be money. It can be opportunity. It can be helping and supporting suppliers to build their businesses, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you can measure it through economics. You can measure it through the value that's being created. So we want to make sure that as a director, we're always thinking about how we can impact positively all of the stakeholders that are impacted by this organization, whether it's community, whether it's the staff, whether it's customers, whether it's suppliers, whoever. We need to be thinking about them, not just shareholders. And such a director is not afraid to have the tough conversations as well as do the mundane aspects. So those are really the 2 main pieces where it tends to go wrong. We don't have the confidence in the room to ask the tough questions. The main responsibility of a director is to ask questions and move the needle, move people's thinking by asking tough questions. And the mundane aspects about reading the papers, preparing properly, upskilling yourself if you've realized that something that the organization is doing is not something you're familiar with. Take the time to spend with the people in management to make sure that you know and understand how it all hangs together. And literally the mundane bits of reading the minutes and identifying where things were misstated, because that is a legal document. No one may ever read it, but you bet your bottom dollar if anyone does need to read it, you better make sure it's accurate, because then it could end up in a court, it could end up some kind of emotional blow up between 2 family members, whatever. But recording exactly what was said in that meeting accurately, and the actions that were taken and the decisions that were made is really, really important. It gives you something to refer back to learn from, to use if you need to in some kind of legal context, also to give confidence to bankers. They're now starting to ask for minutes, etc., to see that the company that you are running is being run professionally. It gives them confidence, lowers the interest rates they're going to charge you, makes it easier for them to give you bigger loans, etc., because they can see this company is governed effectively. we have confidence and comfort that we can lend the money and they'll pay it back because it's transparent. It's not all over the place. And the other part is, well, the board needs to work together and it needs to have a rhythm. So you need to have regular meetings. Quarterly as a minimum, but ideally you should be at least having something happening monthly, whether it's an exco meeting, whether it's a committee meeting, board meetings as well, but there's usually work that needs to happen between board meetings. Ideally, for a smaller organization, we'd recommend having board meetings every 2 months because it builds more momentum. 3 months is just a long gap and things tend to slow down. Action items don't happen till the last minute. You just really don't get any momentum. It just keeps bouncing along at a certain level. As soon as you make the meetings shorter and more frequent, then you start to build some really good momentum and the business starts to really, really grow. And it's holding the company accountable to a performance standard higher it's ever had before. So it's not just holding the CEO accountable, but it's setting performance metrics for the entire organization based on what we've agreed as a strategy. So we've come up with a strategy. The board owns the strategy. Now it needs to hold the company accountable to deliver the strategy. That's what
also, Tim, business is all about. Like one of the big things about accountability is that often when somebody says that word, what it seems like someone with a big stick, right? And I have some pronounced ADHD, and so my version of accountability is, please, like, take your meds, sit down, do some work. and that's said with love, and it's said with like understanding, like, I can produce brilliant work if I can actually sit down and do it. So sometimes accountability is the very thing that you so desperately need. And you know what, these days in this like plethora of AIs and explosion of tech, like we've just got so much going at us, like just so much. And accountability is going, hold on, you make fish hooks. You make the best fish hooks in all of Dahlstrom. Like, make some great fish hooks and like sit down and don't worry about like your online sales pitch to, the northern regions of Afghanistan. Like just sit down and do your thing. And that's an accountability. And I think that's what Tim's talking about, is it we see all the negative connotations, we see all the big brother connotations, and actually sometimes accountability is the thing that we all desperately need. We need somebody to say, hold on, didn't last quarter we say that we weren't going to do this anymore? Why are we still doing it? And sometimes really great businesses have got this oversight lag where nobody's stopped it. You kind of, nobody actually cancelled the subscription. You're still like paying 20 or 30,000 rand because nobody did the thing. So just to kind of get you into the picture in terms of accountability.
Yeah, and one of the modules we talk about is the 4 flows, and accountability is great. I'm going to hold you accountable, but if I haven't given you the authority, I haven't clearly defined what your responsibilities are to deliver against, and authority to deliver against those responsibilities, and I haven't got some kind of loop where you can disclose back to me what's happening and what were the targets, where are we, so that you can report back, then it's next to impossible for me to actually hold you accountable, because what am I holding you accountable against? And it's, as you said, it's not big stick. It's to try and how do we improve? How do we improve? How do we improve? And only if you cannot improve and you're not a good fit for the organization, that then it's well, look, this is really not a good fit. We're going to have to move you on. But we need to make sure that we've given every element of our business the opportunity to perform, because we've clearly defined what it is we want it to do. And that's why a board is so important, because it's providing the guidance, providing the direction, and then working out what policies make sense to give us the guardrails to work within. How do we make sure that we've communicated the strategy effectively into tactics and actions in short enough periods of time or long enough periods of time for the team to be able to move forward? Have we given them the role and responsibilities that are clear so they can be autonomous? Have we given them an opportunity to give feedback, and how does that funnel back up to the board in terms of a dashboard? All of those things talk to each other. And it's one word, but there's an awful lot behind that helps it happen. And the big difference between effective and ineffective is there's not a big stick, I'm going to judge you. It's how on earth do we help each other improve. And it starts in the boardroom. If you've got a boardroom where this judging, this you said, she said, he said, that stuff is happening, then it impacts the whole organization. So we have to get that right. We have to be aware of it, and we have to have the right people in the room to do it.
Yeah. So that's the consequence of not having training. So as you all know, when you go into a situation where you're feeling a little bit, on edge, or a little bit out of your depth, or you've got some imposter syndrome, you'll go into the room and you'll go, well, whenever there's something here that I recognize, I'm going to jump on it. I'm going to shout about it, because then nobody in the room is going to think I'm dumb. And actually, that's why boards don't work, because of lack of training. Because instead of like people going, okay, cool, well, there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm not going to understand. It's not my job to second guess the executive team. It's not my job to look at the performance and say, I'm like some genius and I'm going to tell you how to perform better. That's not actually the job. The job of directing is not at all being a second layer of executive management above the executive managers. Because if you're doing that, that's why boards fail.
Yeah.
So never ever, and Tim and I can go on and on and on about this, because so often we'll see, ex-CEO is stepping down as the CEO. He's taking on the role of the chairman. And we're like, that's going to be a horrendous failure. Because come on,
Yeah, so what we're trying to teach, and we talk a lot about in Module 1, before you are let loose in a boardroom or do anything else in the program, is to understand the foundations and understand the difference between the three hats. So we've selected this motley collection of different shapes and sizes and colors for shareholders, because the only thing a shareholder has in common, or shareholders have in common, is they have at least one vote. They could have bought the shares, they could have inherited the shares, they could have been given the shares, earned the shares. There's all kinds of ways that they could have ended up with the shares. But the only thing they actually have in common is that they have a share and they have a vote. They also have a very limited set of roles and responsibilities. The board is very different in that it's a team of equals. Everyone has the same votes, has the same power, and we want to move to the point where there's not thinking about power, it's thinking about how do we work together as a team. So it's very much a team dynamic, very much a team of equals. Whereas the management doesn't really matter how hard we try, we still end up with some kind of hierarchy, with a CEO at the top. And in our experience, it's better to have one CEO, MD, and in terms of terminology, I find that words really matter, and managing director is a much clearer definition or description of the role than CEO. CEO tends to move into the ego space because we get influenced by the American way of using CEO, the CEO role. Managing director is about being the manager of the organization and being a director. And it's the only person that does both. So it's having it in the name just focuses the mind on, okay, I've got two responsibilities here. How do I make sure that I'm balancing them? How do I make sure I'm thinking like a director in the boardroom? And then I'm taking that knowledge of decision discussions down into the organization and managing the organization effectively. But there's hard lines between shareholder and the board. Shareholders have a basket of rights to appoint and remove directors, and they have a right to a return on investment, whether it's a dividend or capital growth. But that's it. Shareholders must not be involved in the strategic decision-making process, and they certainly must not be involved in operational discussions, because it's not the role of that hat. That hat is separate from all of the things that are going on in the organization. You are giving the board the legal right to run the business. The board is where the law is going to go if there's any mistakes made. So the shareholders, like we talk about the ship analogy a lot in the course, you've built the ship, you've determined what its purpose is, now it's set sail. And it's up to the captain and the crew to make sure it goes where it needs to go, does what it needs to do. And a business is no different. But if you're wearing all three hats in the boardroom or even in a management meeting, it's often really difficult unless you know and understand deeply what the difference is and which hat should you be wearing in a particular context. So we spend a whole module going through that and going through worked examples so you can understand the difference it makes if you're thinking with one hat, and how quickly you can move through the work of the board and directors if you are only thinking with a director hat. And that understanding moves meetings from 2 days or 1 day to half a day to 3 or 4 hours, because there's a focus, because there's a deep understanding of this is the work we need to do in this room at this time with these people. And we don't get sidetracked by conversations that are operational, or sidetracked by conversations that should be shareholders only. So it's understanding that this is typically a self-ish relationship. This is a selfless relationship. And there's a contract here because there are two sides of the interests. The company needs you to generate value and has a contract to define what that value is. And as an individual, we want to be able to show value by the company. We want a return on investment or return on effort, as it were. So we want some kind of remuneration. So there tends to be a backwards and forwards between interests in this context.
And I think, Tim, this is one of those sort of pause moments where you're going, yeah, but I mean, like this is for a big company. Like this is for, you've got to have a big turnover here to have all of these different roles and these responsibilities. Like, come on, it's like saying, oh, have you reported to HR? What do you mean? I'm HR. I just founded the company. I'm also the chief typist. I make the coffee. And that's why we call it the 3 hats, right? Is that it doesn't matter the size of your business. And this is a practical exercise to take away after the session and go and sit down and go and draw this on a piece of paper and say, when I make a decision, and I've just founded a company, when I make a decision, which hat am I wearing, right? So if I've got to put money into the company, which hat am I wearing? Am I being the shareholder? Am I critically evaluating why I would invest in this company? Am I being a director? Am I going, what am I critically applying? So what do I need to do from a structure point of view to make this company succeed? And then from a management point of view, I'm going to be one doing the work. Am I doing the work properly? So those hats are it seems so simple, but a lot of the work and a lot of the learning and a lot of the teaching that you're going to engage with is just around stopping and saying, what hat do I have on? And very, very often you'll find, if you go to the board of Glencore or Bouygues or one of the massive multinationals, you will find a board full of people who've got management hats on. And if they don't, there'll be a board full of people that have got shareholder hats on. Nobody in both cases needs to have those hats on. At a board, you remove that hat and you genuinely engage with what is in the best interest of the company. And that's just a practical takeaway from today. And if you do that, you'll be amazed. You will be amazed at some of the decisions that have been made and go, oh, now I understand why we might have gone down the wrong path, or we might have overcapitalized, or we might have done these. We were just not thinking as directors.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. So just conscious of time, let's go through what's in the course. So as I mentioned earlier, you've got 8 board meetings that are the foundation of the course. Those 8 board meetings are based on what we've called the Sirdar Governance Compass. And this was one of the first things we developed in around 2009, 2010. So you have a board meeting to discuss what's the purpose of this simulated organization that we're building and the strategy and direction. And then you have a meeting to discuss what's the organizational culture of this team we've put you in and the organization that, again, in the simulator that we're taking forward. So we're trying to, as I said, make it as practical as possible so you can try these things in this little team of people that team of strangers that you've now been pushed together with in the training, but you can also go in and try and apply it in the organizations you're working with at the same time, and ideally at the same time. So you can bring the learnings back to the classroom and ask myself or ask the rest of the people in the cohort, say, well, what's your experience? This is what I tried and it really didn't work, or this has gone really well, and share that enthusiasm, share that learning. So we take you through strategy, then it builds into culture. So if you don't understand where you're going, then it's really difficult to determine whether the company has the right culture or not. If it doesn't, what are we going to do from a strategic perspective as a board to help shift the cultural direction so the two work together? Now we've got a basis where we can decide, have we got the right people in the team, and how do we hold people accountable because we've got something to measure it against? We can do some kind of measure of whether each person's working with the same company values. We've got a measure about where we're going here. Now we can see how far we are along the road. We can measure performance. Those are the foundations of the organization. Now we can look outwards. This is what we will call the decision-making cluster, because we need to look outwards at all of our different stakeholders. And the simplest model is to put together a matrix that determines what is the influence of this stakeholder and what is the impact of this stakeholder. And if we map that out, then we quickly see, okay, we need to have really close relationships and speak regularly with these particular stakeholders, because they can have the potential to completely wipe us out. Or these ones, we just need to keep in touch with them, send them an email now and again, keep them informed about what's going on. They have a small impact and they have a small influence. So it's just a management function to keep track of what's going on with them. The other side of this coin is the risk management compliance, similar process, but now we're starting to look at the impact from a monetary or a damages or a opportunity perspective versus the probability that that event might happen. Similar model, but a different perspective, different context, different answers. And in the middle is shareholder returns, because it's really important that as an organization, coming back to the three hats, we have a clear understanding of what shareholders want. Have the shareholders, even if it's one shareholder, written down saying, I want this kind of performance, I want this kind of capital growth, I want this kind of net profit, I want this kind of dividend. These are the things I don't want the organization to ever do. These are the things that, some basic guidance about the framework of this organization that you may or may not be aware of, the purpose of this organization that needs to be written down. So as a board, we now know what to report on to shareholders, and it gives shareholders a lot more confidence, or the shareholder hat can be left more easily out of the boardroom, because there's more confidence about, okay, I've given the director group enough information to run the business and to report back to me to say, this is what we've done. So I have confidence that I've picked the right team. I have confidence that the business is being run well according to my requirements. And then you go around to financial results. So it's thinking about the conformance, but it's also thinking about where's the money coming from, where's the money going to, what is left behind in terms of driving the purpose of this organization. Are we leaving behind enough cash to put aside for capital expenditure? Are we making sure we've got enough working capital? Are we making sure we're putting enough aside so that we can pay the dividends we need to, et cetera, et cetera? And do we have timeous and effectively displayed and written financial results so we can actually get to that information quickly? And then your last formal module is we take you through a board evaluation process. So you do an evaluation of your little team, just like you would of the board you're working with. So it gives you a worked example, gives you the feedback that you would expect to get, or we would expect to give you in the real world, gives you some feedback on you as an individual, so that you can have the conversation about, oh, how could I have shown up better? What could we have done better as a group, etc. In the real world, you then go around again, continue to go round and round this circle to try and iterate and improve and build momentum in your organization. So we've only got time for one cycle in the course, but at least gives you exposure to each of these elements and enough time within a month to get to grips with at least a significant portion of it, rather than trying to do everything at once. So we'd wanted to break this down into bite-sized chunks so that you've got foundations for a month. We talk about three hats, we talk about some other elements of the foundations of governance in 1 month, in one module. Then the next month, we talk about how do you build the team? How do you build the team of the board? And we use a tool called Contribution Compass as the profiling element to determine what your best way you think and act might be. But it's one module. This is how you would practically build a board that would be as effective as we can make it. Then module 3, you're only talking about, and you've only got items on the agenda of this first board meeting with your team to talk about strategy. And then culture, effective leadership, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then module 11 is we do a wrap up. We go through all of the different modules. We go through all the different key learnings in each module. So just a bit of a refresher, a reminder. And if you want to go back to the notes, you'll still have access to everything online. So you can go back to watch the videos again, or you can go back and check your notes on the online platform to try and refresh the particular things that you might want to implement now into your business, or you just want a reminder of because it was really useful for whatever the position is in your company and your journey. So that's how we've done it to try and make it as comprehensive as possible. And it really covers all of the different elements of learning. So you get an opportunity to be in a boardroom with a group of strangers, running a meeting, following an agenda, making sure you give everybody the opportunity to speak, etc. We give you the opportunity to be the chair. We give you the opportunity to be the scribe, so you can start to see how that changes your behavior and changes your focus in the meeting, because you cannot focus on the same things when you're focused on being the chair as being the non-exec director. They're different, they have different roles and responsibilities, and they force you to think in a different way. As a way of helping you understand that having a CEO who's also the chair is disastrous. I need the voice of the CEO to be in the room the whole way through the meeting. I don't want them distracted about trying to summarize and be the chair and make a note of what decisions were made. That's not part of the CEO's contribution. And likewise, I don't want someone who's a non-exec director to be the scribe, because the same thing happens. We want someone else to be the scribe, so everybody that's in the room as a director can focus on doing the work, and either take a recording and let someone outside the meeting be the scribe, or have someone in the meeting who is the scribe with a recording as a backup. But either way, it needs to be someone else, if at all possible, because then you get the best value from the individuals that are sitting around the table. And that's all part of the learning of being in the program and having those different opportunities. You've got materials online, so videos, there's some readings. We take you through the book, The Traversing the Avalanche, over the course of the course. So you read a few chapters each month. That was the book written by our founder, Carl Bates. As I said, we give you an opportunity to do the contribution compass profiling tool to better understand where you fit in terms of energies, and where as a team, when we're building the board, we try to find a way of putting individuals around this circle so that the board is as balanced as possible. So you have as different outlooks as possible. And again, this is learning to apply in the real world.
Tim, I also think that there's two big things. I think one of them is that we've got this really lovely online platform. It's the repository of everything you'll have learned. It's also sort of micro learnings. It's also the ability to have a searchable database of all of the questions that you might have. So and I'm not trying to it's in any way reduce the impact that AI has on our lives. But often if we go out into the sort of World Wide Web and ask a question, that question can be answered in any kind of way. Once you've gone through this process and you're inside of our ecosystem, the answer you get inside of our ecosystem is going to be vetted. It's going to be the right answer, and it's going to be something that you've heard and practically applied. So that's one of the things. The other is that everybody at some point during their career has gone through some kind of psychometric evaluation, and often it gets quite irritating. Certainly for me, that you've got Gallup Strength Finder and DISC and Enneagram and all these kind of things, and they're much of a muchness in terms of the evaluation of the contribution that you make with your energy. So what we've developed is a couple of crosswalks. So you go through the contribution compass, but it'll give you a crosswalk, and then it'll let you know quite usefully what you would tend to in these other different psychometric evaluations. So it gives you a sort of a bit of language to go, okay, cool. Well, I know I always show up in this way. I'm a number 4 or a green or a champion, or they're all kind of the same thing. But it just means you can focus on what is really important in terms of the role that you play within an organization.
Yeah, so we chose the name Contribution Compass because we want to know how individuals contribute towards a team in the way that they think and act. And then we run a team profile so that we can see how the team will contribute towards the organization, which is obviously critical in a board context. And what I didn't mention before was catalyst profiles in this tool are generally very good at working and understanding strategy and direction. It's just the way they think. They're thinking of new ways of doing things, thinking of looking at the future, looking top down, looking from above down to the organization. That's the perspective they have. So there's a lot of contribution will happen from those individuals around these elements near the top of this governance compass. But when you start talking about risk and stakeholder engagement and financials, etc., then someone like me, who is a catalyst profile, is going to struggle, because it's the opposite profile. It's a different energy. It's a different way of being. Meanwhile, custodians, cultivators, conductors are going to be, yay, now we can really engage. Now we can really get into this thing. We can really talk about risks, and no one's going to tell us to shut up because it's not ready yet. So it's important to understand how we all fit.
Everybody's heard that. Everybody's heard that lovely story about the commentator at the Masters Golf saying to Tiger Woods, you know, you're number one driver, you're number one putter, you're number one approach shot player, but you're number 10 in bunker play. So how much time do you spend, you know, practicing in bunkers? He said, none. I know I can't play them, so I'll stay out of them. And that's very much the same as this. It's not that you can't. It's that you give your best, you give your absolute gold when you are in flow and you know what your contribution is. And so this just helps you to say, okay, you're always going to think about something a certain way. So just make sure you've got other people around the table that think a slightly different ways so that you can have better outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important for us to know who those individuals are, so we can build a team that allows them to function in where they have the most energy. Any questions? And the other we've got here, yes, we talked about that. So you get a copy of the book, Natural Energy Contribution Compass. You get 64 continuous professional development, continuous professional development points. We use a company from the UK. And what are we still on 90 days free access to Sirdar base?
No, I think we've decided it should be a whole year.
Okay,
and the thing about a book, and let me tell you, if anybody is in my particular neurodiverse spectrum, the idea of sitting down to read a book is mortifying. Like, I can't think of anything like more boring and or more difficult. But what we do is cover every single one of the points in the book through the course, and there's an opportunity to be able to summarize key kernels of that book as you go through the course. So don't at all be chased away by any kind of overly academic sort of rigor. And that's really what we've prioritized in this course. It's practical and it's applied. This is not a business school. We're not going to ask you to, you know, go and do these terribly complicated, you know, academic research papers. And it's called academia because actually it's lovely to think and whatever, but it doesn't have any practical application to what you need right now to run a business well. And that's what we prioritize.
And just to give you the confidence that this is not the first time we've done this thing, we have been going since 2017, but we've also been running multiple cohorts per year. So a cohort is usually maximum 20, 22, 23 people in a group, and then broken down into the individual board teams that compete against each other. But we've completed 66, and I think we've just started the 68th or something recently. And we've done over 800 participants have been through this program, including at least 500 from sub-Saharan Africa. And we've got offices in Kenya and Ghana, and now partners in Nigeria, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, all over the continent, starting to spread across the continent, Namibia, Botswana. So there have been participants from pretty much everywhere in sub-Saharan Africa. I think virtually every country in sub-Saharan Africa of any size has been represented. So yes, this does work across multiple countries. This is not it only works in South Africa. And the question does come up. It doesn't only work in South Africa. It works anywhere. UK, UAE, Saudi Arabia, anywhere.
Hong Kong, Australia.
Yep. New Zealand is where we started, so it definitely works there. Any questions? And these are the next two cohorts. We've started the April one, but we will be running a catch-up session the first week in May, because there were quite a few people who couldn't make that particular date. So we're running a catch-up session in the first week in May. The most important thing is to make sure you're available for the second module, which is the 13th of May onwards. The reason why we've kept some seats open is because we don't run morning cohorts very often. The majority of people seem to prefer afternoons. So if you prefer to have sessions in the morning, if you prefer to do the 4-hour monthly session in the morning, then this is the opportunity. The afternoon sessions, next one starts in May, on the 19th of May. And that may or may not be including some people from Mauritius Institute of Directors. They've just had some rule changes from their government. So we're just seeing. But the next one, online one, in the afternoons, will be running starting on the 19th of May. So any questions for anybody? You can hands up or unmute. Any questions in your context? Is this for me? Doesn't sound like it. Can I help you?
Yeah, and please, anybody, you know, go onto our site. We've got lots of resources there. Engage with any of us. We've got 2 fully amazing program managers that you can reach out to at any time of the day, and they're like really responsive, and they pop back, and you know, they'll WhatsApp you, or they'll send you a link, or they'll do all sorts of things. And they you know, one of the things that we try to do is that we're this hybrid business. We really believe in technology and you know, these kind of hybrid virtual trainings, etc. But the human element can never be lost. And so we've got human beings behind all this stuff. And the collective wisdom of all of these human beings is staggering. And again, from our entire organization, we spread all over the continent. And we've got some really, really great people that can answer some really like topical and also situational questions. It's not just the sort of South African show.
Cool. If you want any more information, want to arrange a one-to-one for me to go through with you exactly what your circumstances are and whether it would be a good fit, we can also talk about you know, if it's something that you can only look at doing in the future, then at least we can make a note to keep you in touch with dates of cohorts as and when they become available. Yeah, so please either send me an email or drop something in the chat now, and we'll follow up.
The answer is yes.
And the answer is yes. Evas, you said you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Ben.
There was just one. Yeah, there was just one. There was one question from Ben. Yeah, and it was. Is it Ben? I mean, yeah.
Ben, April cohort, part of the TNL. Yes, it is. Yes. I thought I recognized your name, Ben. Yes, it is part of the Lefka network discussion. And for those of you that came through Enshrine placement, we haven't finalized a deal yet with them, but there may be an opportunity for something through the Enshrine organization as well.
100%. Absolutely. Sasha. And
yes, I maybe might have missed it, but I didn't hear the price. I only heard the cohort and when does it start. So if you could maybe give us a little bit more on that, please. Thanks.
So it depends on where you are. For SA residents, it's 58,750. As I said, there are a few deals with different membership organizations that we have going. For the rest of the world, it's $3,995 plus whatever taxes. So if we're billing out of South Africa into another country, you may or may not need to pay VAT or other taxes, but that's the standard rate. And I'll just put up those dates again. So at the moment, these are the 2 that are in the diary, and we have participants registered for. The next one we said was probably going to be in July. Warwick, did he? Can't remember now. July? Yes, I think we said next one would start probably the end of July.
Yeah.
So as I said, it's 4 hours once a month. Everything else is online. Typically 3 to 4 hours a week to watch the videos, to read a couple of chapters, to prepare for your board meetings. So it's not an MBA, but it's a similar kind of process. You're in a team, you need to do some homework, and you need to be at a facilitated session. But it's trying to be as similar to serving on a board as possible. You have a board meeting once a month. It's in the diary. Move heaven and earth to make sure you're there, and everything else in terms of prep is in your own time whilst you're driving. Listen to the audio, take some time off on a Sunday, whatever it is it's needed to get the work done. Did that answer your question, Shesha?
Yes, Tim. Yes, it does. Cool. I have all the info now. Thank you so much.
Good.
And I mean, if there's one sort of slight peculiarity, and you say, but why rest of Africa in dollars and South Africa in rands? We're not the government, and we still unfortunately live under the era of exchange control. So I'd love to charge everybody in dollars, but we can't in South Africa. So that's the answer.
Well, we can, but they wouldn't be able to pay.
Yeah, it would be a problem. Cool, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Much.
Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending your time with us. And yeah, if you've got any other questions, please feel free to drop me a line.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.